4 years, we've gathered around the fire to talk about books that shape how we see the world, how we do our work, and how we show up in our communities. And sometimes one of us hasn't even read the book, but that's all part of the fun. So we're inviting you to pull up a chair and join us in the conversation.
All right. Welcome back to another episode of Root Notes. We are scheduled for a Campfire Chat tonight, which we are obviously, if you're watching the video podcast, not around a campfire, but we are on the screen porch. So we are
porch chat.
It's drizzling outside.
That's right. It has a ring to it.
It does have a ring to it, and it's keeping us dry. So that's a plus.
Yeah.
So tonight we're going to talk about a book that I also have not read, but I'm excited about this one.
You should be excited about this one, Wes, because as I was reading this book, unlike some books that I've read and talked with you about, I actually think you'll like this book.
Yeah.
So I think you should actually put this on the list. The book is called Abundance. It's by Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson. Ezra Klein, I'm sure most people know, is an editor with the New York Times, has a big following there. Derek Thompson writes for The Atlantic. And we're here discussing it with our good friend, Adam English. Glad to have you back.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah.
Excited about this book.
Yeah, man. Hey, I'm digging the Santa Claus shirt.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you're watching
Oh my goodness.
summer,
Christmas in July.
Exactly. It's Christmas in July, so you got to go with it.
And I'm so glad you said that, because I am wearing, if you're listening to this podcast, I'm wearing a National Fragile X Foundation shirt. July is Fragile X Awareness Month. And so I just want to put a little plug out there for families like mine affected by Fragile X syndrome. This is the month to look it up if you don't know what it is. Find out more about it. Check out the National Fragile X Foundation. But that's not what we're here to talk about.
No.
Abundance by Ezra Klein. Now, what are the interesting things about this book, Adam? Well, maybe I should start with you. What do you think about this?
Yeah, the basic idea is the observation that we have spent way more time, money, policy, and energy to produce less and less. But to me, the most interesting example in the book is a success story. Mm-hmm. And in fact, it's maybe the most successful government enterprise in the last 50 years, maybe ever. And that's Operation Warp Speed. So it's a great story, and they tell it through the eyes of Paul Mango, who's kind of the head of that. The idea is, hey, you've got COVID, it's 2020. Most vaccines take 10 years to develop. They want to do it in 10 months.
Yeah. And
the hurdles you have to overcome, you've got to, first of all, do the science, figure out what kind of vaccine platform will address this. So they put out a wide net, lots of funding for lots of different vaccine possibilities. Then you have to run it through approvals and production. And, as you remember, the Pfizer vaccine had to be held at negative 70 Celsius. So Corning had to make a special glass that wouldn't break.
Yeah.
And then you have distribution. Mm-hmm. And you're using FedEx and UPS and Walgreens and CVS to put shots into arms. Uh-huh. And then finally, you've got the cost of this thing. And it's the simplest, but maybe the most coolest thing about it. The government bought every single dose and then could charge whatever they wanted to. And they chose the zero. So the crazy observation, there's this great line in the book. It says, the most advanced biotech in 2021 was free.
Mm-hmm. It's such an awesome.
It's a great point.
It's awesome. I was reading this book and I just got chills, really, because I remember that moment. And, we're all living it. Everybody who's listening to this lived it. But some of us were working in public health. Mm-hmm. And it was such a relief that these vials started becoming available, that these vaccines were going to become available as a real solution.
Yeah.
And so when they're talking about it in the book, man, it's like a love letter to the vaccine.
Yeah.
And it really does capture what was a tremendous success on so many levels. And one of the things that just is in my heart so good is to think that, we got a chance to be a part of that story in little or big ways. I remember one of our colleagues who's the head of the nursing program and a very distinguished scholar of nursing leadership, She was in the latter part of her career. She had all the bona fides. She was out there at a mass vaccination event on her knees, giving shots to people. We ran through like 100 shots hours that day. And it was tremendous. And so to just have that captured, if the book didn't tell any other story from a public health perspective, it's such a cool thing. So I'm glad you started that.
Yes. And so it's at a cost of about $40 billion total for everything. You were able to save something like 20 million lives just in the first 6 months, and an estimate, I think, $6.5 trillion savings in hospitalizations, in economic productivity. So the bang for the buck is enormous. Now, it's a beautiful story, but then the observations they take away from it are pretty interesting. So you think, okay.
Hold on, I want to pause that.
Okay.
Let's go back to that.
Oh, man.
Like
he was about to make the good.
I'm dying to talk about that, and I'll let you do it.
Okay.
But that's a teaser for later in the episode, so stay tuned, because this is the thing to talk about.
Yeah.
But before we get there, they go through. This isn't just about healthcare. In fact, it's not mostly about health. I would say the big premise of the thesis of the book is government has a place in making important things happen. And that we have not really sort of changed our conversation about this to be a conversation that assumes abundance rather than we assume scarcity.
Oh, sure.
And so we frame things so that we've got to fight over scraps instead of going like, what if we just blow the lid on this whole thing?
A great line in the book is, politics is not about the problems we have, it's about the problems we see.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that a great line?
Stuff.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
And that's just it.
So
Do we
what do you
see
pay attention to?
fear and scarcity and anger, or do we see opportunity and abundance and friendship and patriotism and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
That makes total sense as a framework to me, because when you think about scarcity and you think about paying attention to these individual specific finite things, we make policy around how do we ration those out, right? How do we take what feels like very little and make it available to everyone? And that becomes a policy sticking point in every budget, in every conversation.
Yeah.
So they got a solution. That's what you're telling me.
Well, so what they do is they talk through a bunch of examples of really cool things happening. So another example that's totally not health would be Sputnik. And this decision that we are going to win this engineering and space race, and all of the investments that went into that, and the way in which we sort of saw quantum leaps forward and understanding of all kinds of things, including how to get ourselves to the moon. And so that example was lifted up. Another example that you might have watched a film about, some people listening, Oppenheimer, they talk about the Manhattan Project and the way in which government invests massive amounts of money, but also under a framework that absolutely just facilitates innovation, right? It's saying, hey, let's get this network of people that are excellent in their fields together to just figure out stuff. And how those kind of innovations spawn off all of these agencies that are theoretically, and have proven to be, in some regards, just these engines of invention, right? Like DARPA. You know, the internet, if you don't know, came out of this governmental agency trying to figure out how to solve big problems, right?
And it's not about, I think some people listening would say, well, yeah, if you just dump a bunch of money on it, dump a bunch of money on the problem. So they kind of go into, there's two approaches. There's push funding, and some of it is just dump a bunch of money on it and see what happens. You're going to get, you don't necessarily have a guaranteed outcome, but you're going to have a lot of spin-off successes and maybe some failures along the way. But there's also pull funding. So they're not just saying throw money at every problem. Sometimes you dangle the carrot and say, if you meet these certain benchmarks, then the money will follow. And the great example in there they give is Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation dangled, I think, like $1 billion out to some pharmaceutical companies because there's an African strain of a pneumococcal disease that they were simply not developing a vaccine for because it just wasn't financially worth it, and they didn't think these African countries
People wouldn't
would
be
pay
able
for
to
it.
buy it.
Yeah, I got you.
But
So
dangle it out there, and
Well,
okay,
they
if I
dangle the money.
yeah, they did.
It's pulled because they dangled we'll buy it.
Yeah, well, yeah.
They'll said, like, if you develop
Exactly.
it, we'll buy the dose.
So they didn't push the money; they dangled the pull money and said, "Hey, if you make it,
we'll
buy it." So
Yeah, I get
you've
the-
got a guaranteed sell.
yeah, I get the idea of incentivizing with a just big bolus of cash, or the incentive of if you make it, we'll buy it. So for those of us that haven't read the book, though, and for those of us that have been paying attention for a long time, the thing that stifles progress, the thing that stifles innovation is not just a lack of funding, it's red tape, it's bureaucracy. And so when you're talking about Operation Warp Speed, that's an outlier because they just ripped all of that away.
There you go. That's the whole point, right? Yeah, that's the
Okay.
point.
Okay.
Yeah, like look what we can do if we can cut through some of the red tape. And so
Another really recent example. One of the things that's cool about Abundance is that it just came out. So this book came out in March of 2025. And so it has really recent examples. And one of them is, do you remember when Baltimore had the big problem with the bridge?
Oh, yeah, and the governor declared a state of emergency.
So this should have taken
Like
years.
24 months. Yeah, I remember
And it
this.
took days
Yeah.
to get a workable solution, and in months we were roaring.
Because they blew through all the zoning.
He basically said none of this stuff is going to be.
We're not having,
It's gonna click
committee
the-
meetings, and
Right.
we're just going to fix it. Yeah, I
So
do remember.
that is one of the big things in the books.
It's a trade-off, right? Because you have processes and approvals for a reason, and litigation for a reason, right? So if you say we want to do this at warp speed, you're going to have to trade off something. And so I think they do a good job of trying to say we don't want to be dismissive of all those processes, and because some of them were for very legitimate reasons, for safety, for future impact, all that kind of stuff. And, so it's a matter of finding that right trade-off.
And see, that's where I would disagree with you. I don't think that they do nearly enough to deal with the trade-off. I think that in fact, this book is described as techno-optimism.
It definitely is.
And I think, because let's get to some of the points that would be related to what you brought up. Bureaucracy, red tape.
Yeah.
And one of the big problems that they identified that we should be working on and making much more progress with is housing. And they talk about the fact that one of the reasons why we do not have affordable housing has to do with the bureaucratic red tape and zoning laws and these kind of things that prevent affordable housing, apartment units, things that we certainly could build and would have demand. But we don't because of why? Because we put in zoning protections or environmental protections. So you got to get clearances to find out what the environmental impact's going to be. Speaking of the environment, another one of their examples is climate change. And they talk about the fact that there's been this really interesting thing that's happened so back in the day when raiders were using environmental protection as the way to stop development that they didn't want to see happen.
Oh, yeah.
Because it would interrupt with, the environmental conditions that they were trying to protect. Fast forward a few decades. Now what we really could use to deal with some of the climate issues and environmental issues we're facing is a rapid scaling up of things like solar.
Yeah.
But you know what's standing in the way of that?
Bureaucracy,
The
policy,
other side,
approvals.
the other side of the political spectrum, using the exact same environmental impact studies, these exact same types of lawsuits to stop the kind of development they don't want to see in their neighborhoods.
So that's what I was going to say is this has been weaponized then to slow progress.
Yeah.
So that's the political quagmire. It is, on the surface, we want affordable housing. Everybody's for that. We want clean energy. Everybody's for that, until that means that you're going to put a solar farm near my neighborhood, or that you're going to zone my neighborhood for high density residential apartments. And now I don't want those nearby.
I don't want that in my backyard.
That's exactly it.
So
it's a trade-off.
It is a trade-off, and I don't think they deal with that enough.
Hey there. just a quick pause to say thank you. The response to Root Notes over the past few weeks has really been incredible. If you're enjoying this, one of the best things you can do is leave a quick rating or a review. It helps more people find us, and it tells the algorithm that this kind of conversation really does matter. All right, let's get back to it.
But one of the things that this tees up is what you were talking about in my mind. So they got this beautiful love letter to the vaccine and the project at Warp Speed. And it is, by so many ways of looking at it, just a smashing success, right?
Yeah. So
and then they make this up.
Well, yeah. So they say, okay, this is a political coup. This is a big win. And, but of course, what happens, Biden takes office in January 21. And of course, Biden and the Democrats don't want to celebrate it because it happened under Trump's watch. So they said they were going to rename Operation Warp Speed, but basically just let it fade. I mean, they just didn't talk about it anymore. And you think, well, it is a big win for Trump. He ought to be celebrating.
Win for Trump.
But in his 2024 campaign, really didn't talk about it. And in fact, brings on the most biggest vaccine skeptic in the nation, RFK Jr. And
to head our vaccine.
Yeah. And so, because it doesn't really play well to his base to talk about vaccine. So, what they describe it as it's this political orphan. And here's this great quote, right? You've got Casey Mulligan, who is the chief economist for Trump's White House, claiming that the urgent lesson of Operation Warp Speed was that too much government hinders private innovation. And of course, you're thinking no, that's exactly the opposite. Right? This whole thing was because of government funding and government push and government influence. And yes, it was private corporations and it was, CVS and Walgreens and UPS and FedEx and Pfizer and Moderna. Yeah, definitely they're private. But they're being, who's paying the bills on this? This is definitely a cooperation.
Yeah.
And so, they're kind of just pulling their hair out like, oh my God, this is this huge success that nobody wants to own or take credit for or celebrate or learn a lesson from.
Right.
That's what's shocking, right?
See, and that's where, I didn't want to steal that moment from you, but
I appreciate that.
That is the thing, the biggest moment in my mind in the book is their just acknowledgement of that.
Yeah.
But to me, it's also like working on the ground, doing what we do. That's where the hard stuff happens. Yeah. And the reason I think they're a little bit Pollyanna and they don't actually get into these trade-offs enough is that if you read this book, you would think if we would just take away all of the things that are throttling back innovation and just let it go wide open, we would solve all the big problems. And the truth is, for instance, like Operation Warp Speed, if you look at where we are just a few years down the road, this is not distant, right? Just a few years down the road. The reality is that now we've got one of the largest measles outbreaks in our recent history, right? That is pushing us towards the edge of it no longer having an eliminated status in our country. And I think there's a pretty strong line to be drawn from that back to Operation Warp Speed. Because what had happened, what was internalized, the message that so many people got from what I wish people saw as this tremendous victory of investment in innovation and science, what they got was, see, that's why you can't trust government, because they'll like play willy-nilly, they play fast and loose with the rules. You don't know what. It's supposed to take 10 years to make a vaccine. Well, look, apparently you can do it in one. That seems fishy to me. Everything about it. And then you got all these people who are not getting the flu vaccine now. It's spreading to these childhood vaccinations. And I recently heard our Secretary of Health and Human Services questioning varicella vaccine.
Are you serious?
Yes. And so I think one of the things that they don't give enough acknowledgement of is that those complexities are a part of the innovation. And if you don't solve that, you can have all of these collateral problems that are created.
Yeah. So let me play the part of the pessimist who would say,
Oh,
who would say, it's not politically expedient to have abundance. It's a good political message, but it is not politically expedient. In other words, to have the populace need you instead to parse out, to fight for, to scrap for what it is you need.
Yeah.
See, that is a message that that resonates. And if you have abundance, if you are able to have Operation Warp Speed for environmental concerns, for housing, for healthcare, then all of a sudden it feels like maybe we don't need some of this government. Maybe we don't need, which is the point, right?
Now, see, I would flip around.
Yeah.
You started to flip it around almost everything, but when you started out with, I would flip it around. You said that abundance is not politically expedient.
Yeah.
But
Not in reality. As a message, it is.
yeah. See, that's where I would flip. I think messaging scarcity mobilizes people. You message fear, it mobilizes people. Now, in the background, what you want to have is abundance, so that you keep your constituency happy. But you message, there's fear at the borders, there's fear abroad, there's fear from our political enemies. And there's scarcity. We've got to fight for them. I think that is motivating to people. But I do think you want to take care of your people and make sure they are enjoying abundance.
If that was the case, then we'd have a much better society. If the messaging was scarcity, but the truth was abundance, and you were taking care of your constituents in a way that they had affordable housing, that they had health care, then great. I don't really care about the messaging. We'd have a much better society. But the truth is that if I come in and tell you there is enough, they're just not giving it to you. I can help you. But the truth is that I'm keeping it parsed out. That keeps you dependent. The messaging, I think, is... I
think that's part of it. I do think that there's like these political sort of manipulations
There you go, yeah.
that get in the way. And sometimes it probably looks a little bit like what you're talking about, Adam. Sometimes it probably looks a little bit more like what Wes is talking about. But one of the things that's most compelling to me that they sort of allude to, but, it's this NIMBYism, the not in my backyard. People want to solve problems theoretically. One of the examples they give is these, like, all these blue cities, right? Like San Francisco, where it's so unaffordable to live there. And you'll walk by all these Black Lives Matter signs in a town, in a city where the black population is going down every single year because people are moving out because it's not an affordable place. They'll say, no humans are illegal, but you can't possibly, you can't rent an apartment in the city. And so and why? Well, because people want to protect their home values. And so they're not willing to solve in their own areas of influence these problems that they want to talk about at the national level. You want us to have cleaner energy. Do you want turbines on the horizon?
Right.
And it's when we fight these battles to protect our backyard instead of solving collectively the problems. And those pieces aren't exactly about technology and innovation. And so they talk about that somewhat, but I think that they allow sort of the mechanisms that people use, like lawsuits or red tape or environmental impacts things, to sort of mask, okay, yeah, but what's really going on here? We've got to have people invest themselves in solutions. You know what I mean? We've got to put it at a community scale so that people feel like it's our problem to solve.
I think that's correct. I'm guessing they would probably say, well, what we're trying to do is just reframe the conversation. If we can get people excited about the possibilities of these solutions, maybe we can get them to move past their objections.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
So show me the political party that's doing that.
Yeah.
Well, no.
There's not one.
And that's, I think they're actually critiqued a lot on the left. As you look at online chatter about this book for moving, because they really do call both sides of the political spectrum to account and say, you got to do better and we've got to make government work better, because part of their point is we actually have, even though we've all internalized this thing that government doesn't work, we got this laundry list of examples of government really doing important things. And what we should learn from that is, okay, can we solve big problems? Obviously, yes. How do we go about doing it?
So the laundry list, the outliers that they are citing.
Well, that's an interesting word to use.
I mean, in terms of
Are they
just,
outliers?
Yeah, no,
I don't know if that's true.
well, okay, what's the common factor across all of them?
Oh, so I think I know where you're getting at. Like, there's this crisis.
Yes.
And they talk about that.
Okay.
And they talk about the fact, and this is actually pretty persuasive. I'm glad you brought that up. It's a pretty persuasive point in the book. I don't know if you remember where they were talking about the fact that things are considered to be crises because of the frames we put on them. Right? Sputnik was not really a crisis.
yeah.
Like, okay, Russia put a satellite into space. Well, okay. We could have ignored that. We framed it as a crisis and motivated the country to move in a certain direction. I mean, it even changed the curricula in public school, right? So their point is to say, how could we frame some of the challenges we have as crises that could bring us together?
Yeah, if we decided we have to cure Alzheimer's is a crisis, a natural crisis, we have to cure it in the next 2 years. We could probably do it.
Yeah.
But, there's interesting studies from wartime communities. It's counterintuitive. You think, well, the city's being bombed. The society's going to just fall into chaos and everybody's going to be against everybody. And, you're going to see the biggest divisions when there's those kinds of shortages and chaotic and death. But, of course, just the opposite is true. That's when communities really come together. They pull together. They help each other out. You see your neighbor in a ditch. You're going to go help them. Their wall got busted up by a bomb. You're going to go and check on them. You see people at their best. And so if you can leverage a good crisis
Always the good crisis.
to the good.
Okay. Let's be realistic about this. If everything's a crisis, nothing is a crisis.
No, I don't think they would say that about everything. And they're saying there are real, like, they said we should be unsatisfied with where we're at with cancer research.
Sure.
Like, we should have better results for what we could have done. Housing. This is a solvable problem. Climate change, we could do quite a lot to be curbing that and investing in fact, they tell a story about, solar cells were invented in the United States.
Yeah, that's true.
But we didn't really roll out the implementation framework to scale solar. Meanwhile, it feels like our counterpoint in all these conversations now, China, they didn't invent the technology, but they rolled out an infrastructure to scale it. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you got a Chinese grid that is heavily leveraging solar power.
Yep. And making it better and more efficient, improving it.
Every step of the way, it's getting cheaper and more effective and more efficient.
And the same thing
with like high-speed rail. China has like tons of
they spend so many words on high-speed rail.
They really
so many words.
Yeah, and the same thing is true about microchips.
Microchips is another example.
A technology we invented, but we cannot produce in our own country. We don't have the production line to be able to do it. And we're just like, why not? This is a massive failure, right?
So one of the reasons I read this book and immediately thought about you, because we have this interesting dynamic where I'm much more optimistic about communities and people and human nature than you are. You are way more optimistic about technology than I am. Like, you have faith that we could figure this stuff out with innovation and machines and science. I think you'll love this book because it does talk about how much could be accomplished if we were smarter about the way in which we do that. But I want to turn our attention for a few minutes on something that we're all academics, and they do really interesting conversations in this book about the structure of discovery and the investments into research. And why that's so fascinating to me is they brought up all these ideas that I'm kind of ashamed I never thought of. like for instance, for one thing, it tells this beautiful story of the history of the National Science Foundation and the NIH and how those early investments were so small, but then they ballooned up to be able to give us a lot of the things that we now enjoy.
Right.
In terms of improved lives, saved lives, etc. But it also tells a story that over time, all of the bureaucracy that's added to that, all of the paperwork. Do you know, they quote a statistic in here, do you know what percentage of time a researcher in like one of the top labs, do you know what percentage of time they're spending on paperwork?
30.
40% of their time.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me.
So the example they give is if all of the scientists were to contract some disease that meant they couldn't go to work half the time, that would be a crisis.
Yeah, right.
But when we give them paperwork that takes them out of research half the time. And so,
you know, it's not just the raw time. I mean, this is going to sound like just complete white collar whining. I get it. People are out there breaking their backs, digging ditches.
Yeah.
But when you're trying to do cutting edge scientific research, you know, that is taking a maximal amount of concentration, energy, effort, attention, brain power. And now I'm asking you to divide that to these other tasks that by the way, I'm making high stakes. They're not low stakes. Yeah. If you mess this up, you lose your funding, you lose your project. So I'm adding this weight of anxiety.
Yeah.
You know, some people, as a strategy skill, have said, you know, I'm gonna have one outfit I wear every day as a way of kind of cutting down the mental decision. And that is so I mean, if people are, you realize like I want
to think about my socks.
Yeah.
But now we're giving them paperwork.
Yeah, right.
So, I mean, you're talking about the highest level of intellectual production.
That's a great point.
And you're going to weigh that down with this meaningless paperwork?
Yeah, such a
well, to bring that back down to pretty much everybody, you know, everyone has a skill set and an expertise. We talk about clinical providers being able to practice at the top of their license, and then we stick them into environments where they are constantly bombarded with administrative duties, with paperwork, with things that are not the best use of their expertise or time. And that happens all the way through every echelon of every organization, right? Yeah. And so it's not, that's a systemic problem.
Well, it's systemic, but just to bring it back to research for a second, it's particularly a problem at places like the NIH, and it has to do with paperwork and bureaucracy, and it has to do with this idea of grantsmanship, where what ends up being funded are things to people who have connections, who work the connections, who they talk about they get good at performing science more than doing impactful science.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And have the most likely positive outcomes.
Do you remember
they're not risky at all.
They call them doomed to success. That's the real problem we have, because people aren't taking risks. You and I talk to organizations, health departments all the time about we've got to figure out where you have the capacity to take risk, or else you're never going to innovate.
Yeah.
And it talks about that you have to play it so safe that the real problem with NIH grants is that they're doomed to success because they're so obvious.
Yeah.
That they're not interesting.
You know, I think one of the biggest false fears is the fear of waste. Yeah, I think we should embrace waste.
Here's the quote. I don't think that's what abundance means.
You should write that book. We'll talk about. Embrace waste.
I mean,
I know where you're going with that.
Wasting an effort or an opportunity or science, or whatever, you just don't do it. I mean, how many opportunities get wasted for science because you just don't want to? I don't want to. What if this NIH money we use doesn't produce?
Yeah.
So I'd rather
it's accountability.
Produce the guaranteed thing that's less risky and less wasteful.
Sure. And less impactful.
Sure.
So this is where we get to ideas that I can't believe I didn't I'm embarrassed that we aren't talking about this all the time. The government could get good at trying to discover what works in discovery. They talk about how we could make it science about science by running little experiments where you let's say you do 2/3 of the NIH grants exactly as you would normally. And then 1/3 of them, y'all don't have to do any reports.
Sign me up for that.
And you have an experiment.
Yeah.
Right? And look at over time, what are the discoveries out of this group versus that group? How much waste are you able to like audit them, whatever? It's C, because I bet it's a fear of waste that is not, I mean, sure, people will take advantage of it, whatever.
The fear of waste is driving everything right now. Doge, for example, like we're cutting because we're afraid that we're wasting what are scarce resources.
Yeah, there you go. It's a scarcity mentality.
So it's the scarcity mentality. And I mean, this is fantastic in terms of a framework. And back to your point about, I wish I thought of this. Do you remember having a conversation that I brought up a conversation not long ago about wanting to carve out basically a sandbox that is not connected specifically to the university, but is a place where we put in resources, where it's no holds barred innovation for every aspect of what higher ed does. Not just a think tank.
What I think ought to be.
Like a real one.
A real
Yeah, but it's not just a think tank. It is a place where you can innovate with very little restriction and very little expectation of a specific outcome, and then take what's learned from that back to the shop and actually implement it. We talked about that before.
Absolutely. So listeners who are connected to academia or academic projects or whatever, research, I mean, I think we should really start advocating for this type of thing. Like Klein and Thompson would love everything you just said, because one of the things they point out is a lot of these things come from discoveries that were not really anticipated. Mm-hmm. But if you watch the film Oppenheimer, and obviously there's a lot of there that's fictional and for Hollywood or whatever, but it depicts a group of people being brought together without hand-holding, without a lot of, accountability, but to figure out, like, how do you solve these problems, work together, work in whatever arrangement makes sense for you. What if we funded it like that? Mm-hmm. What if we just funded a percentage of them like that?
Oh, yeah.
Like, hey, you're doing interesting things. We like the way that you think and the people that you're connected to. Here's some money. Do good stuff. We'll keep an eye. Like, we'll look for what you discover. You can't do all of them like that. Yeah. Do that with some of the money and then figure out, does that lead to better outcomes?
That goes back to that push versus pull funding, right? Some of it should just be push. Like, we're just going to give you money.
Hey, y'all figure, do something that's interesting to you.
And a lot of these granting agencies fund projects, but they won't fund positions.
Right.
But sometimes we just need to fund the person.
Fund the team.
And fund the team.
That's what we did with the Manhattan Project. We funded the team. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so these ideas, when I got to them, I was like, we need to completely rethink
we need
this
the
stuff. And
they need their own sandbox.
And here's the thing, man. This might be the moment to do it.
Well, I'm down with that.
A lot of it's being rethought now, whether like it or not. Mm-hmm. So maybe when we build it back with some more intention to sort of implement some of these ideas.
So to that point, it takes a lot of bravery as a leader to say, I'm going to step forward and say, we're going to innovate and we're going to have the sandbox and we're going to see what comes out of it. In a time when the conversation is only about cutting and about scarcity, and the public sentiment is about scarcity. Yeah. I mean, the thing that I love everything about this book, but going back to your point about me being a realist, David, not a pessimist.
Is that it? Okay.
Yeah. Right. I worry that there's no political will. There is no one brave enough, no one with the platform to step up and do that. And so talk to me about how this happens locally, because whenever I say the national level, the state level, David goes, no. It's local.
I mean, that's an interesting question. I'm going to put a pin in that for just a second, because I think you're right at some level, like, who is the political leader that's going to champion this right now? But part of my point is, like, we were talking about this in universities. Mm-hmm. We're not talking about this kind of innovation and, like, could we... Like, part of it just is our own acknowledgement that we don't really know whether these guardrails around waste and these kind of things are effective or not. Mm-mm. They've just sort of evolved.
We just know that they're safe.
We know that they're safe, right? but we don't know what the alternative really is and how risky that is and what it would bring us. And so I think in the academy, we could start with the conversation, right?
Yeah,
and then we could ask for a different NIH, ask for a different NSF. And at least in my time as a professor, I've never really heard people having these conversations that are in this book.
Well, another way to start small so that you wouldn't have to be, I think you're fearful of like this one person that's out there standing alone on a mountaintop, crying. They talk about bottleneck detectors.
Yeah.
And so where are the bottlenecks in the process?
Those are the questions we ask organizations all the time.
Yeah, and they're going to be different for everything, whether you're creating, a nuclear bomb, a vaccine, a railway system, whatever. Yeah, of course, there are different bottlenecks. Some of them are bureaucracy, policy. Some of them are funding. Some are just the process altogether. But if you kind of switch mentalities a little bit, okay, where's the bottleneck here?
The pain.
And then it doesn't make me sound like, well, I'm just going out on a limb and just going to risk the university or the the state funds or whatever on something. I'm just trying to solve a bottleneck problem, which everybody wants to solve. And once you can, then suddenly, maybe things start to happen differently. And some of that bottleneck might be, we're funding only projects and not people. We've got some people that can do some really great things. If you just give them a sandbox, there's a bottleneck.
Yeah, there's a fun little exercise to work through bottlenecks and things like that. Ask why 5 times.
Yeah, that's right.
And we've done that.
Now I want to come back to the pen.
Yeah, okay.
And this is probably a good place to leave it. You asked, and we spend so much time talking about, look, we have got to orient this around community. We've got to orient this to a human scale. We've got to make the problems relatable. We've got to solve this in neighborhoods.
Yes.
And that's where I live and die. This is true.
Yes.
But every single time we talk about that, we put this little asterisk on it. And, when we talked about this in previous episodes, we say there are things that you can't replace at the local level.
Your vaccine development can't happen at the local level.
The NSF, you can't replicate that. How would you possibly replicate that? The NIH, you can't replicate the creation of the internet at the scales you'd have to with the partners you'd have to. That's not going to happen. You've got to have the structures that we have at the federal level to facilitate some of those things. And so I think it's about thinking about what is the problem that has to be solved nationally and what are those problems that we need to make sure we're solving locally. And then here's the really important thing. If it has to be solved nationally, we need a nation behind it. So that work, so that we don't have orphan projects that are some of the most impressive projects that you can imagine, like Warp Speed, we have to have done the work on the ground so that all along the way, that work feels like my work.
Fair enough.
That's the part of this that our techno-optimists don't pay enough of attention. You can't write everything in every book, but I do think that would be my, I think that there's a lot of work to be done on that side of the equation.
So is there something we could take away from this that our listeners are, this week, right, on the commute, that they could sort of think about, public health leaders, higher ed folks, whatever you're doing, something from this book that they should be thinking about that could sort of shift their lens, the way they're thinking, the way they're leading?
To me, the takeaway, I guess, the thing that I think I would want to chew on, and as I'm driving and just sort of really reflect on, one of the analogies they talk about is economic development is like growing a pie. It's when we develop the economy, we grow the pie. And they say that's the worst analogy possible, because when you grow a blueberry pie, you just have more blueberry pie. But they said one of the most basic features of economic growth or even societal growth is change. Something has changed. And I think that's important for leaders to think about. If you want growth, something beyond just static stability, if you want to grow, you're inviting change. You're not just inviting more blueberry pie. Something will change, and that's scary. And I think that should really sit with people. What am I willing to allow it to change. It goes back to that wind farm example. If I want this, am I willing to have that wind farm in my backyard?
Yeah.
That's what change looks like.
Yeah.
And I think we have to, that calls for introspection, right? That calls for soul searching.
I love that point. Yeah, and I think just briefly, one of the things I think this book, the messages it sends is, it's a time where I think there's a lot of frustration and anxiety and problems seem too big to solve. Mm-hmm. And I think this book is a reminder that we have solved big problems and that we can continue to solve big problems and that technology can be a part of that. But the bigger point is that we came together as a community and built the systems that help us solve big problems. Mm-hmm. And so if you're listening to this on your drive and you're feeling kind of not so great about the world these days, I think that's a little boost to our vision. We can do this.
Yeah,
we can do this.
We can do big things.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. We might have to pay for that. I think that's trademarked. Thank you, Rachel Hollis.
We can do big things. We can do hard things.
Okay, all right. So, Adam, every time we have you in this seat, we ask you about the detour we're taking. So, what have you been into lately that our listeners might find enjoyable in some way? Doesn't have to have anything to do with abundance, although maybe it does.
Maybe it does. No, I just got back from vacation. It's summer, and we were in southern Missouri, near Branson, if you're that way.
Where everyone goes.
Where everyone goes with family.
Let's go out to everybody in Branson.
Exactly. Lambert's Cafe. It's the home of the throwed rolls, and they really do sling rolls. Yeah. Yeah, they come out with hot rolls and actually sling them. And about a third of them.
Have you heard of this? I've heard of this.
No.
Yeah. Oh, it's a lot of fun. About a third of them never make it to mouths. They hit the floor, hit your face. Oh my God. Yeah. It's like a Cracker Barrel on steroids. Yeah. They come by with molasses. They come by with.
Do they throw molasses also?
They come by.
It goes very slow.
They come by with black-eyed peas and fried okra, and these are all just kind of floating sides. They just walk around, scoop them onto your plate. Fried potatoes, and so it's a lot of fun.
Don't go in this place if you're celiac.
No, yeah, Carissa is gluten-free.
On a stat.
And so she just kind of ate sides the whole time. So
it stayed away from the flying gluten.
It stayed away from the flying gluten, yes. Yes, you will get hit with a roll at some point.
Explain that to your physician. Would you that black eye? Stale roll. Man, I forgot the duck.
All right, Branson, Missouri.
Yeah.
What's the name of the place?
It's Lambert's. And
Lambert's.
I think the original one is in Sykeston, but they're all across southern Missouri, near Branson was where we were.
I love this
outside of Springfield.
So much.
You never know.
I never know.
About to happen.
I never know what's about
somebody. This is awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Adam. These are so fun.
Yep. Well, I might read this book.
You should actually read this book.
This looks good. I would encourage our readers to check it out, and then maybe we can have a back and forth about it as folks who have newly read the book. As always,
one more thing before we leave.
Yeah, okay.
So we do these episodes with Adam every month, and we're gonna try something. So we've not been announcing the book ahead of time.
That commits us to it, though.
Yeah. Well, here we go.
Yeah.
So if you want to get on the fun, we're going to be talking about a book that neither of us have read and that we will read before we record the episode.
I make no commitment.
Although you might read it before we do.
Moral Ambition is the book. It just came out. It's like a month old, I think. Moral Ambition. It's by the guy who wrote Humankind, which you might have heard of. It was a New York Times bestseller. And this book is about how our best and brightest really need to invest themselves into opportunities, jobs, problems, challenges that matter. Mm-hmm. And so it's all about how you sort of take on with your life something that matters. So Moral Ambition by Bregman. Get the book, read it during this month. Send us a message if you want us to talk about a particular angle on it. If you have a question you want us to think about, send it to us. For those of you who don't read it, don't worry. You'll be represented by Wes.
I'll handle it.
The conversation.
It's okay. I've got it.
But for those of you who might want to get in on what is now going to become a bit of a Root Notes book club, read Moral Ambition, and we'll drop an episode about 4 weeks from now.
Sounds like a plan.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks.